Chapter 11 Topic 6 Part 6 The Children Their Devotion to Islam. 6. A contest between Rafe and Samarah. Whenever an army of mujahideen moved out from Medina for a campaign, the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, inspected them at some distance outside to ensure that nothing was lacking in men and equipment. It was here that he usually returned to Medina all those tender boys who had come out with the army in their zeal to fight for Islam. While setting out for Uhud, the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, carried out this inspection just outside Medina. He ordered the young boys to go back. Among them was Abdullah bin Umar, and Zayd bin Thabit, Usama bin Zayd, Zayd bin Arqam, Bara bin Azib, Amr bin Hazard, Usaid bin Zubair, Urabah bin Aus, Abu Sa'id, Khudri, Samarah bin Jundub and Rafe bin Qudai, Radhilalio and Hum. All of them had just entered their teens. Qudai said to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, 0. Prophet of Allah, my son Rafe is a very good archer. Horat Rafe, Qadiyallahu anhu, 2, stood on his toes to show himself taller than Li was. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, permitted him to stay on. When Sahaba Bil Jundub learned about this, he complained too. His stepfather Murrah bin Sanan says, the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has permitted Rafe and rejected me, while I am sure to beat him in a wrestling contest and, therefore, has more Fizriyina of the Prophets, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, favor. This was reported to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who allowed Sailra to prove his claim by wrestling. With Rafe, Samarah did it all beat Rafe in the bout and he too was permitted to stay ill in the army. A few more boys made similar efforts to stay on, and some of them did succeed. Meanwhile, it became dark. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, made necessary arrangements for the watch and ward of the camp during the night, and then inquire, now who is going to guard my tent during the night? A person, standing at his place. 0 Prophet of Allah. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is your name? The person, Zakwin. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all right. You take our seat. He again inquired, who else is volunteering to guard my tent for tonight? A voice, 0 Prophet of Allah. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who are you? A voice, Abu Saba, father of Saba. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all right. Sit down. He inquired for the third time, who will be the third man to guard my tent tonight?
Again came a voice from the crowd, O Prophet of Allah.
The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, your name? The voice, Ibn Abdul Qais, son of Abdul Qais. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all right. You also sit down. Then the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bade all 3 volunteers to come to him. Only one person came forward. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where are your other 2 comrades? The person, O Prophet of Allah. It was I who stood up all the 3 times. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, blessed him with his prayers and allowed him to guard his tent. He kept watching the tent all night long. Just look how eager the Sahaba were to face death for the sake of Allah and His Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The children and adults, young and old, men and women, all were intoxicated with the same spirit of sacrifice and devotion. Rafe bin Qudai had also offered to fight in Badr, but he was not permitted Uhud. However, he was allowed to fight for the first time. Since then, he had been 11 participating in almost all the campaigns. In Uhud, the enemy's arrow struck him in his chest. When it was drawn, a small remnant remained inside his body. This caused a wound, which eventually proved fatal in his old age.